right. Hello, my name is Adolfo Romero. Today is December 4, 2020, and I'm here today with Mr. Brandon White and Ms. Marianne Quijano. And today we are here on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program with the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholarship Program. And we will be discussing a little bit about the history and Mr. Brandon White's interaction with the program and his participation throughout the years with it. So thank you for joining us today, Mr. Brandon White. Would you please tell us a little bit about the MFOS and how you began to integrate yourself into the program, maybe a little bit about the history from your perspective?
Yeah, so to me, the MFOS program is literally a life-saving program that gives first-generation college students an opportunity to pursue an education that would be denied probably but for their economic status, certainly not because of their academic prowess. And so in that sense, it was revolutionary and I think a legendary program that I was able to be a part of as far as a part of the first MFOS class.
How were your experiences being a first-generation student? What made you? How did you find out about the program, and what did you believe once you were accepted into the program? What were your expectations? What was your experience like as a student?
Yeah, so I found out about the program in the spring of 2006. I had been accepted into the University of Florida, but I had no clue how I was going to actually make it happen. I wanted to go, of course, it being the university that it is, well known for academics, as well as being able to provide students sort of like a holistic living and well-being. And of course, I like football. But I had ended up getting a letter, I think about a month or so after I got accepted, saying that I would be a part of the MFOS program and that the program would cover my full cost of attendance. I had no clue what full cost of attendance meant. I was just trying to get one semester. I figured that if I can get my tuition for one semester and I can ask my mom to give me some of her income tax, I could pay for my housing. And then once I get there, I could find a job and piece an education together. That was my plan. But I took my letter to my guidance counselor who said, Brandon, this is for your full cost of attendance. This is for your tuition, your books, your housing, your food, and this is going to cover everything. I didn't know, like, it was so overwhelming, her telling me that I literally, from what I remember, I started to cry in her office because it was something that I didn't believe was possible.
No, yeah, that's a very touching story too. Like, I mean, being myself a first generation, I understand that those emotions coming in, getting accepted, not even learning like what you have been given at that time. Was UF your first choice when you applied, or were you thinking about other universities during that time, or what made you ultimately what made your decision? What made your decision to come to UF?
Yeah, so, high school was very busy for me. I was an international baccalaureate student. I was a senior class president, and I was in the choir and participated in 3 sports. So wow. I had a lot going on. And so when I applied to colleges, I did receive a number of acceptances to different places, public universities, private, as well as HBCUs. But University of Florida certainly was my first choice for a number of reasons. One, my family was in Florida, and I had no clue what I would do without them if I was far away, how I would visit them, how I would see them. UF in the IB program was the top notch. I mean, everyone was waiting to get their acceptance letters and put on a Gator shirt and wear it around campus to tell everyone that's where they were going. So when I got my letter, of course, I brought my Gator shirt and put it on, and was really happy about it. So it was my target school, I think, for a variety of factors that took into account its prestige as well as the possibilities of me still being close to home, with the only family that I have.
Right. While you were already at UF, how was the transition? Were you suffering through any like imposter syndrome? How did it feel being part of UF? You know, there's not great diversity within the university. So, you know, being with this group MFOS that has a good amount of diversity, I wouldn't say within the group. How did those spaces influence you and kind of like move forward with your coursework and kind of succeed through the next years? Was that part of did it help you out at FMOS in that aspect?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I'm a Black man. I was one of 3 Black men in my IB program. I was the first one to get the IB diploma at my high school. So there's a sense that I've had for a while of being one of the only people in the room. And so I tackled imposter syndrome, or was beginning to tackle it at that point. I think imposter syndrome changes based on your situation. But the good thing is that I did believe I had a strong academic background, and I wasn't afraid to be around people that I thought didn't have the same backgrounds as I did. But the thing that was really tough for me or on my brain was can you actually do this? I didn't have any examples of anyone in my family that went to college. I really felt like I was out there alone in the sense that, hey, you know, you can't really ask anyone back home for suggestions on how to handle different challenges at class. Another piece of my personal story is that my siblings were all high school dropouts. And so when I was a senior, I watched my younger brother drop out in the 10th grade of my same high school that I was the senior class president of. So it was a little weird because I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me. And with those classes and with no one having done it, I showed up to UF very concerned that I was actually not what everyone thought I was. I wasn't going to make it. You know, maybe I was just a bunch of talk, and, you know, maybe my school was just easy. And so I wouldn't make it here because these are the smartest people all into one room, you know, all on one campus. So I did have those feelings, and I had to face them and overcome them. A lot of that was overcome by creating a sense of community. In the MFOS program, helped foster that sense of community with other students, to where I felt like there were people that were like me. I didn't feel like UF was made up of only rich people, or, you know, only white people or whatever other stereotype a PWI can fit into. I didn't feel that, in part because of getting involved in the MFOS program, being involved with the Black Student Union and some other groups, to where I was able to create a sense of community.
Excellent. Thank you. Great answer, Mr. White. So once you were inside the program, what were some of the highlights that you would say MFOS provided you, or were you able to get along with other, I guess, your main circle of friends? Was that part of the MFOS, or would you say they're like a second family, or were you still participating outside of that realm of the MFOS and still kind of like put yourself out there, expose yourself a little bit more?
Yeah, so what I tried to do, I think it froze again. Can you see me?
Oh, yeah, I can see you. Sorry about that. It's
no
my
worries.
connection over here, but
You know, honestly, because of how things worked for me in high school, when I got to UF, I tried my best to basically replicate what I had done. I told myself, hey, I'm going to get involved in the student government. I'm going to see what other organizations there are. I'm going to get involved in cultural organizations. And I basically tried to do that. So the MFOS program was very critical in introducing me to other students that were like me and that were going through this for the first time, just like me. Basically, if we were afraid, we were going to be afraid together, and we weren't going to allow each other to fail. It was sort of like a lean on me, lean on you situation. We all had the same amount of pressure, and we were all dealing with it. And I don't think that it was a huge weight, but I think that people took it as a responsibility to look out for one another and, hey, can you help me? Do you have any notes with these classes or so on? Can you help me study? That's what the MFOS provided. They really took a hold of the first year Florida program and had an MFOS component of that. They had workshops that taught us about finances. I mean, we had never been on our own before. If you were me, you were used to being broke. So when you had a lump sum of money, you were like, how am I gonna manage this to make this last? And so that financial literacy was really important to the MFOS program as well. And then, I think a hidden component of the program was just a sense of encouragement. I think it was hey, like, you belong here, you're doing great, encouragement that we really got from the staff, and not in a charity case way, because I really resent that. I'm not a charity case, but it was in a way of being a trailblazer. You know what I mean? Like being a person like who got in on their own, but is making it, and look at you being successful at the University of Florida, and you may have 2 or 3 more challenges than other people are, but you're still being successful. That means something. And so I think that we got that encouragement with the program, which I think was critical to my success, and I believe was critical to other people's success. So.
Fantastic. No, yeah, I really enjoy how you talk about financial literacy, just because for the fact, like in schools, nobody really teaches students how to budget their money. And once they receive this large sum of money, what do I do? Do I splurge? What do I like? You do not know how to control that money. So I'm glad that somebody's out there kind of helping out the students with that, or kind of understand, hey, now you have to learn how to budget, like real life tasks that are happening.
Well, and one thing that happened for me, and I believe happened for others, is just that that people need help back home as well. So how do you juggle maybe the need for financial assistance at home with work that you have there? I think the MFOS program alleviated that concern for a lot of people about needing money themselves. But the truth is that for a lot of people who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds like I do, money is generally not discussed. There's no need to discuss it because there is no money. So I really appreciated MFOS ushering in those personal financial skills that some people learn at home, but I think for a majority of us, we didn't. It was not something that we recognized that we needed to know.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that question. How was your experiences with other students? Maybe would you like to share a story or two, like from maybe your comrades, your friends that you guys talk about? Were people in similar, to get accepted, people are usually in the same situation, at least financially. Were there some stories that you would hear other students talk about? Yeah, fairly open with that.
Yeah, I had a good relationship with other students. After a while, I rose up in student government and became somewhat known on campus for involvement in different things. And I would meet people. I had an opportunity to speak at some of the MFOS events about my story, and that also helped me meet people. And I think that people, for the most part, were going against the same challenges and adjustments that I was going through. And we really, I think bonds created a little bit deeper depending on what college you were in, and maybe if you were going through the same classes as well. But I had a lot of friends, close friends at MFOS. We would be in the same dorm room. We would go to our workshops together. We would study together, especially in those early years. I wanted to say 9th and 10th grade, but it's not that. It's freshman and sophomore, but I think that they were a big part of understanding resiliency and sort of leaning on one another. And a lot of them are still my friends to this day. As far as their stories go, believe it or not, some people's stories were even more, I think, compelling than my own story. Some people had been homeless, for a portion of time. I think that the MFOS program, in addition to its diversity, what people were interested in studying, I was in business school, but there's other people who wanted to change the world through politics. There were dancers and singers, and there were so many other people. It's not like the program was just targeted towards engineers or people in STEM, maybe. And so you got a real diverse, not only like group of people from economic background, but just a diverse group of people for thought and what they might be thinking about bringing to the world. And I really like that about how the program brought us together. And it was really great. We still talk to this day, and some of them are doing those things, exactly those things that they said that they were going to do. I didn't end up in business. I ended up in law. But that, I think a lot of business people ended up in law.
It's almost hand in hand, that's for sure. I have a next question. Actually, it was going to be what you were just talking about. So what happened once you graduated? You said that you ended up applying to law school. Did you stay in Florida? Did you go somewhere else? And did you keep in touch with MFOS, or did they keep in touch with you?
This is a really good story. So when I first came into when I first arrived at the University of Florida, I had an opportunity to speak at a board of trustees meeting. I wrote a pretty long thank you letter when I got accepted into the University of Florida. And I sent that thank you letter just to the address that it came to my office. I didn't address it to anyone specific. It turns out that it went to student affairs. It got to the vice president of student affairs, Dr. Patricia Tejas-Irvin, and she invited me to speak at the board of trustees about what I wrote in my letter, just like, how hard it was to get scholarships. And I had done all this stuff with IB and all this involvement, and I thought it was going to happen for me. And how ultimately I thought I was going to end up in community college, which would have been crazy because I had like straight A's in advanced classes. But, at that meeting with the board of trustees, the dean of the law school was there, Dean Jerry, Robert Jerry, I believe. And Dean Jerry gave me his card at the end of that meeting and said, I want you to keep in touch with me. And what ended up happening was he kept in touch with me for 4 years. And so when it came time for me to graduate, I was applying to law schools. I applied to several law schools, in excess of 10. One of them was the University of Florida. And I ended up getting accepted into the University of Florida. I remember I applied to all my law schools on Christmas. I said, look, it has to work out if you apply on Jesus's birthday, right? So I ended up getting into UF in January. And I really loved the connection that I had with Dean Jerry. We had built a friendship over 4 years. I was able to meet different professors, and it just felt like home going to the University of Florida. I ended up getting into quite a few law schools and was considering going out of state. Some people tell you that you need to diversify where you go. You went to UF. Why don't you go to Harvard? That would be nice. And some people actually did end up doing that. But I know personally for me, I sort of found myself once again wondering about finances like I was in high school. I had the MFOS program, and then out-of-state tuition for a law school would have been kind of expensive, and I would have been away from my family, another consideration that I had 4 years previously. And so I again thought that the University of Florida, having been there and knowing that I had a great time, it just felt like the natural choice to go to UF Law School.
Okay, and after you finished up with UF Law School, did you stay in the UF area? Did you work for UF, or what did you do afterwards?
No, so law school is 3 years, and I worked for a judge in Miami in the Southern District of Florida. He happened to be a UF alum, a really big UF alum, Judge Huck, and a wonderful guy. And then I worked for a law firm, Foley and Lardner in Orlando, on my second summer in law school. I ended up having a job waiting for me for about a year and a half into law school. So I got my job after I worked in Foley, and I was just waiting to finish school to start working. I ended up moving to Orlando and working at Foley and Lardner as an associate in their business litigation and dispute resolution group.
Okay, fantastic. So in your experiences with the MFOS, what are some strengths of the program that you feel that the program has? Can you explain a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think the program has an ability to bring out things that are already within you, but that you're not noticing about yourself. I think the program is, pushing you to not just be at the University of Florida, but to be an influence, to be something while you're there. Just getting to college is not the end point, it's the starting point of whatever you make it. And I think the MFOS program was really good at showing you where you can go from that starting point, what you can do, like what involvement you ended up doing. Like if it wasn't for the MFOS program, maybe I wouldn't have pushed to be in student government or a rights scholar. I ended up being inducted into the UF Hall of Fame a lot because of the conversations that I had with people at UF about just pushing and stretching myself, still making sure that I have high academic standards. But what are you contributing? What are you learning about yourself and others? And I think that they really helped bring that perspective. It's weird because when you have so many challenges at home, all you can do sometimes is focus on yourself to try to get out of those. It's awkward. But what the MFOS program did was remove some of those challenges for you so that you can start to become a citizen in whatever it is that you are thinking about doing. And that's why I love the fact that it's open to everyone and pushes everyone to learn about so many different things, because what it ends up doing is building you, but then in turn, it encourages you to start building others. And I think that those are ultimately qualities that stay with you throughout your life to propel you through success, because life is hard, and life is really hard, and there's no leniency for people who are not improving other people as well.
Correct. With the evolution of the program, I mean, since you were part almost of the first class coming into the program and everything, I guess after your 4th year, how did you see the difference of the program being?
Okay, yeah, I think it's just us now. So I guess the question that Adolfo was trying to ask was, how did, from your first time encountering the MFLS program as one of the first students involved with it, how did you end up seeing since then how it's changed, how it's transformed, how new ideas are kind of infiltrating how it's turning out for newer generations?
Yeah, so, I had the unique opportunity after I graduated from law school to be a part of the Leadership Council, which really gave me an in-depth look at what was going on with the program. I couldn't believe that they were like adding more and more students. They have the ability, it's just grown. There's such a need for this help with students. And as good as the program was, there was more people who needed help. And I think that they have really, over the years, risen to the need, like to meet the need. And so I think that that's awesome that they've expanded the growth. I think that they've expanded the staff and the programs so that students can do more. I'm obviously not there on the ground and I can't see every single thing, but those are 2 gigantic tasks to meet the needs of students like me who are in the program and who need help. And as I understand, they've continued to push the envelope with training and support in a way that I would imagine is benefiting those students in unimaginable ways, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that too as well, just from interviewing different members of the staff today. So when you were a student involved in the program, what was your relationship like with donors? Because I remember hearing from other interviewees that donors really enjoy speaking to students. So I was just wondering if I remember you mentioned that you had a close relationship with the dean of the law school, but was there any other kind of relationships that you formed with individual people whose names you might have remembered?
Oh my gosh, he was a doctor and I have his letter here. His name is slipping me because it was so long ago, but I had somehow become popular with donors because I was on some marketing material. And so they saw my face and they would be like, that's Brandon. And I would be like, yes, I am Brandon. And so I was able to speak to a lot of donors, but one donor in particular became a pen pal for me. Like he wrote me letters and we would write back about how I'm doing. I don't think the program even knew that he was like writing me letters. And I ended up going and visiting him at his house. He was quite elderly. It was so long ago. I hope that he's still alive. He was, but he wrote me and the most encouraging things. And he was just so personal and nice. And I remember meeting him and his wife in Gainesville. And we had such a great time. We watched football and talked about all these things. And I really thought or like looking back in retrospect, I think that is sort of representative of how these donors are. They're not just giving money to the program. I think that people in the program like me really do remind them of themselves, and they wish that they had a program like this, or they've seen a kid who, was denied an opportunity literally through no fault of their own, like just because of money or challenges. And these are good people who like really want to see improvements in the world. And it's not for their own recognition. A lot of the donors really don't even like to be known. They just want you to understand that you can do what you want to do. And I think that there's a piece that reminds them of their kids, reminds them of themselves, or reminds them of like a piece of the world that they want to see happen. And I really thought that that was encouraging during my time. Over the years, I've had the chance to be involved in fundraising, go to games with donors. I've been, invited up with the Bull Gators to eat at the football games, and I've met a lot of people. I never once felt like I shouldn't have been in that room. And it wasn't because of money. I mean, these are some very rich people. It was because I genuinely felt that none of them cared about any of that. What they cared about was that you were a Gator and that you were here, you deserve to be here, and they wanted to know what you were going to do next. And so I always felt comfortable around them. I think that that's how the donors are for this program.
Yeah, that's really great to hear that they were so close with you and probably other students as well. Speaking of connections, I was wondering what your role or your relationship with professors was like as well, because I remember as a student myself, I was always intimidated of going to professors' offices and things like that. And I was wondering if how you talked and interacted with professors, if you still talk to any of them afterwards, if the MFOS program kind of aided in forming mentorship relationships.
Yeah, so I'll tell you that it was a progression. When I first got there, I wasn't the one to rush to talk to professors. And in some ways, the classes, when you start at UF, are kind of large and you have teaching assistants. I did go to office hours to speak to teaching assistants. But I think that around my senior year, I started talking more to professors. I think really because I had to, but also because they were needed for letters of recommendation for the next steps. I got really close with Professor Conwell. And he was a professor in our African American Studies program. And I remember he ultimately wrote a letter of recommendation for me to go to law school. And was it Dr.? I know I called him Dr. Brian, but now I'm trying to remember his last name. He was the dean of the College of Business. And I had ended up being in Florida Leadership Academy, which was like the leadership academy for the business school. And he was really, really helpful for just encouraging me to get through the business school. Around junior year, the school gets ridiculously hard. like scary hard. Like I need to go to tutoring zone and figure out like what they're saying in these classes. And he was really influential in getting me through. Another person who wasn't a professor, but was a director of the school was Horace Tucker in the Warrenton College of Business, who was always there to help guide me with classes and requirements and things that I needed in order to be successful, not only at University of Florida, but also in order to be attractive for recruiting purposes. Because I was applying to businesses. I ended up getting a job at Johnson & Johnson and like Siemens. I was finance. So I ended up getting the job, but then ultimately going to law school. But I don't think my resume would have even been picked up without Horace.
Adolfo, you're back.
Yeah, sorry about that. My internet connection's been acting weird, so I just connected it through my phone right now. So luckily I have 5G, so we should be good.
There's a Paul here. Oh.
We have Dr. Paul Ortiz now joining us. Hello, Dr. Ortiz.
Hey, Ren. Hey, sorry for cutting in, y'all, but I just had a special message I wanted to share with you, Brandon. Hey, and thank you for doing the interview.
Welcome.
It's fascinating. I had to give some testimony at a Board of Trustees meeting just down the road. They're meeting today. But I wanted to actually give you personal greetings from mention my dear friend and colleague, Bill Conwell.
Yes.
And I told him we were doing the interview with you today, and he said, "Say, hey, how are you doing? Great."
Oh.
So he was just so thrilled to hear that we're going to be talking with you, and just wanted to kind of check in. But yeah, he and his wife Faye Harrison, of course, moved to Illinois a few years ago. Terrible loss for our university, but I've been able to give some guest lectures in his classes. They're thriving there. They're really doing well. So, but
wow, that is so awesome.
yeah. So he just wanted to say, hey.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that note. And tell him I said hello and I miss him dearly. And thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Brandon. So I'm just going to kind of zoom off right now. It sounds like a fascinating interview. So go ahead, take it away, Marianne. You're doing wonderful.
Thanks. Where were we? We were talking about professors. Oh yeah. So I was wondering, in your time at UF, you were mainly in the business college, but you mentioned that you also took classes with the African Studies program. I was wondering what kind of curriculum did you try to build for yourself as a student?
Well, it became important for me when I was at the University of Florida to learn as much as I could about African American culture and life. I had no clue about all the different things that weren't taught in my very fancy history class that I studied hours and hours for. And so I had this business piece, which the background of me being in business school was that I worked at McDonald's for all 4 years of high school. And when I got to college, I was like, I have no clue what I'm going to study. So I'm going to study business and I'm going to own my own McDonald's one day. That's how I ended up in the business school. But when I got there, I got involved in BSU. I met other people. I was doing student government, and it really became attractive to me to learn more about African American studies and culture, because the information that I knew was very shallow. I thought that was a shame, being Black. Like, shouldn't you know your stuff? And so I took these African American studies classes. Now, the reputation for these classes were that they were very hard. And everyone was like, well, hey, these are electives, and you're going to take these electives with these challenging professors. And it turns out they were hard, and that the professors did expect a lot from you. But without them, I'm almost positive I wouldn't have built some of the study habits that I needed to be successful in my business classes when I got deep into my curriculum into my junior and senior years. And so I think it paid dividends being against people that were challenging me intellectually so early, and taking those African American studies class. And then, as I was telling you before, you sort of look for a sense of community when you're there. MFOS provided that with students and people who came, from similar backgrounds and going against similar challenges and blazing trails that you had hoped to blaze. But when it came to classes, especially the business college, there were not a lot of people like me in there. And so I connected with professors that were like me first, and it encouraged me later on to broaden that out. And that was just a smart choice. The world is not set up to where you can communicate with people just like you. That's not how it works. Right. And so, but I felt comfortable doing it. And they really, I think, showed me the ropes, told me what was necessary. And so if I look back at it, I'm very grateful for my business classes, but I think that those African American studies classes were the most critical classes that I took at the University of Florida.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, especially at UF, I think that even with a student population that doesn't exactly have the most diverse body of students, having those classes is even more important because of that, so that people can learn about histories that aren't their own. So I was wondering as well, you mentioned exactly how diverse your fellow classmates in the MFOS program was. I was wondering if you also saw that as a moment to learn about other cultures outside of your own. Exactly, did you learn about, did you find that you learned from your classmates, not just like study strategies and financial literacy, but other things that any college curriculum might not be able to offer exactly?
I think the biggest thing that I learned from them, other people that came from other cultural backgrounds, was that really they're not much different than my own. And I think we tend to think of each other as being so different, like our camps, but they're not. I think that their histories and the things that they overcame were so interesting and intriguing. And there were a lot of parallels that really taught you that you're more alike than you are different. And, you know, some cultures like to dance. We like to dance, and we learned each other's dances because we just like to dance. And I think it was deeper. Obviously, it's deeper than dancing, learning where the dance came from or why you might dance that way. Is it a ritual, you know, for your culture? And I learned different things like that with, you know, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Indian Americans. And it wasn't just about food and dancing. You know, I think we all agree that our food tastes good. You know, I think it was about survival and how people got here and what they hoped for here. At least for me, that I was learning from other cultures. And it was unavoidable that we would collect with one another at some point because we were at a predominantly white institution. We knew what we were getting ourselves into. If I wanted to be around more Black people, I would have went to an HBCU. So I think that ultimately we knew that we would come together at some point because we were in this foreign experience, you know, to us. But I thought that was great. And man, like, I think it's so good learning those things the earlier you can. I think it's tragic that people learn it so late in life. The other thing is, believe it or not, is I learned probably more about the differences in Black culture than I did about other cultures. I'm from Panama City, Florida. You were Black or white in Panama City. I hadn't met Jamaicans. I hadn't met, you know, anyone from Africa, Nigeria, and I really didn't understand so many differences. I thought, I mean, we're all Black, right? But it's so much deeper than that. I think learning about people's cultures and histories is really just a way for you to always be thinking about how big and how diverse the world is and where you can fit yourself into that. And so there was a lot of that going on, and it kicked off early. It was like my first year there that you recognize that, whoa, this is more than just a bunch of smart people in one place. This is a bunch of smart people in one place from different places. You know?
Yeah.
That added a layer to it that I'll be eternally grateful for.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad that it was so such a creative environment in that sense.
Yeah.
I was also wondering, you mentioned your role in student government and in cultural groups. I was wondering if you and perhaps maybe other MFOS students, what your role is in maybe in forms of student activism at this time, and in student government, what were some of the agendas or platforms that you were trying to push forward, especially as a first generation student who perhaps wanted to create a more equitable version of the university?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're talking to the right guy for that.
Yeah.
Because I started off in student government. I was voted in as a senator in the College of Business, and I ultimately became the chair of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. No one knew what that was, but this committee was in control of $13 million of the university money. It controlled student government budget, as well as student activities, like it funded the gym. It was a crazy amount of money. And what it allowed me to do was I was actually responsible for the budgets of every student organization on campus. So I met the leaders of groups because they came before the budget committee for their money. And so to some people I was really popular, and to some people I wasn't really popular, depending on how much money they got. but it really made me know groups and about like the many different groups on campus in a deeper level maybe than just your average UF student or your average MFOS student, because I literally knew about their programs because they were asking for money for speakers, for example, for Hispanic Heritage Month, maybe. And so when it came to activism, I was definitely a person that was of the belief that we should be trying to make the university the most inclusive place, but also just generally just better. What can we do to make life better? We're not in student government to pretend to be Congress people. Like, what's gonna go on? What are we funding? And in that sense, I really learned, without being in political science, the difference between being a politician and an activist. A politician is navigating the current structure of a system, right? An activist is pushing for something to change. They're disrupting something. I don't think that people understood the difference in some sense. And so we were changing for a lot. I will admit a lot of the change that I was that I did outside of something that was very neutral and independent, like the budget committee, dealt with things like, the BSU and, what changes and stuff are happening there. In student government, what are we funding? Certain things like the rights union, what are we offering students? Where is this going? Those were things that I was involved in and that I thought were really important. And then of course, what are we doing to support groups like MFOS? It's really weird because after a while at the university, you're there and it's not like you're wearing an MFOS button on your shirt. Mm. People don't know that you're an MFOS student unless you tell them or something, right? So I had a lot of people who were shocked that I was one when I was speaking up for all this stuff, and I really don't know why. It was baffling. But I think that is something. I loved student government for that reason. I really thought of it as being an activist tool and trying to change things and being involved with hiring and thinking about hiring people who care about the things that you care about, right? And so that was a little piece of my UF experience that I really enjoyed.
I do have a question. Now looking back at the MFOS days back as a student, and your older self now, what is something that you would tell your younger self if you could go back to those days? Something differently that you probably would have done now that you would have known that you would have gone through the program? Maybe this is more like as an advice to kind of like help the upcoming students to think about throughout the program as the years go by. But
Yeah, I would say I didn't do a lot of this, but I did do it. And I think that when I got there, I was in survival mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm here, I gotta make it. I'm gonna be a huge letdown if I'm not. Look at all these people, they gave all this money for me to make it. I felt like I was being invested in, rightly so. And I think that when you get there, you have to let go of that and think about what you're there to become, not why you're there. And I think generally when you're in undergrad, it's really hard to think about the broader reason why you're there, because undergrad is so much fun. I mean, they have Gator nights and there's football and you'll study for the test a few days before it, right? Like, but I think it's really important to be like, I'm at UF for 4 years, right? I have impacts I want to make here, but also after this 4 years is done, what here is going to influence those beyond years? And I think that that's really critical to think about almost as soon as you start. Like, get there thinking that. Another piece of advice that I would say is that I have not met anyone who did anything special alone. And so it's almost imperative that you network and meet people. The world is so, at least the United States, is so much more smaller than we think it is, as far as when you'll see people, when they'll come back into your life. With social media, which was just starting up around the time that I had gotten there, these people are going to come back around, and the world and your success in the world is actually relationships. Relationships is the real currency of life. It's not money. The people that you know are going to influence how far you go. And I would just tell them, get to know the MFOS people for sure. I think that will help build your foundation. But I really just think generally, meet people, understand what they do. If you know just a little bit about each little thing, it's gonna take you further in life than you ever imagined. Just having a conversation with a random person about what they do will come back around. And I didn't really know that. I didn't understand as much. I think that looking back, I would have taken advantage of a few more relationships. I would have not thought so hard about what we were bickering about in student government, but I would have really had coffee and just been like, hey, like, what is it that you're into? Like, I'm doing business and I want to run a McDonald's, like, or that's changing. I thought I wanted to run a McDonald's, but I want to be a legal pioneer. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the world in UF in some ways, that's not preached enough, how important those things actually are. And it's not just important with the people who look like you and come from where you come from.
That brings me to think about a lot of like social capital, especially if you're coming from low income communities, not having those networks created within those communities. I feel that it's very difficult for first generations to have those contacts, to understand what it means to build those connects. That's one thing that I still seen like within some of my family members, we're not in the best economic, having being up there, at least when we're talking about being in a higher class level bracket. But it kind of brings the question to like, how do you get out of that comfort zone, to reach out to those people, and how do you build those relationships? Do you feel like the MFOS kind of puts you in the spot to kind of like get out of that comfort zone, to kind of push yourself to talk to people?
I think it pushes you some. I mean, you have to have some courage to even talk to people in your like circumstance, but that are different from you, right? I mean, maybe you had the same economic challenges, but that person is from Nigeria and you still don't feel necessarily comfortable talking about different things. Maybe you just don't know. I'll tell you that I used to have the hardest time coming up with conversation. And I'm an extrovert. I'm not a shy person, you know, but I was always just concerned that I was going to look silly not knowing something. I remember once being in a group of people, really good people, that they were talking about their trip from Paris to a person who had never been from Panama City. I had been from Panama City to Gainesville, no Paris. I knew nothing about Paris. And one person was talking about Nutella, like chocolate, that they had gotten in Paris. Believe it or not, I had no clue what Nutella was. I thought it was some special thing. You know, I was like, what's Nutella? And I was embarrassed. And you know what? There comes a point where you have to just be okay asking a question. You just have to be like, what's that? Or where did you go? You know, I think it's different depending on different personality types. For extroverts, it will be harder. And, you know, I think it's something that over time you have to sort of just take an inch and do. But I will tell people, and part of my advice to people is that it isn't optional. It's actually not something that you have a choice in doing. It's something you have to learn how to do in order to make it. So you can start now or you can start later. I think people who start earlier tend to think it's better for them.
All right.
But, you know, it's a hard thing to do. So I would say start with like people first, build it to people who are like you, but maybe have one or two qualities different from you, and then expand it out. But I always was so concerned about just really just not knowing something that was just out of something that was a realm of possibility for my family. We just did not have vacations.
Right. I think that happens. That's something that's common. I'm sure, you know, you weren't the only one in that similar position, especially within the program. But I think through that, you could find some solidarity and inclusion within those groups at the MFOS, you know. I think that's very helpful. At that time, were you able to join in IBC or any organizations within UF that kind of provided that solidarity space for you to kind of like communicate?
Oh, yeah. They had free printing at the IBC. They had a couch. So, I mean, in high school, you are in class, you know, from 7 to 2:30, 3. In college, you're in class at 9 and your next class is at 2, depending how you set it up. And so the IBC was a resting spot. It was a hangout. And of course, it was a place where I could get my documents printed. and I loved it. I know they have a new fancier IBC now that I push for, and that one of my fraternity brothers, Will Atkins, is involved with. But the old IBC, I loved it. I loved how old it was, and it looks like a historical house. I loved that it was next to La Casita, and we would share things and hang out, and it sort of had like the same stuff. And believe it or not, I don't know what the university would do without those safe spaces. I really don't. When I saw that they were being torn down, I said, well, I sure hope they're being built back up, because what is going to happen? Like, do I need to write a letter to someone? Or, you know? So I took full advantage of the IBC. Gosh, the IBC director, I know his first name was Anthony. Why was I calling everyone by their first name?
The comfort.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that those places were critical, but they were also like meeting spaces. We had meetings for BSU there. We had meetings for our fraternity there. We had tailgating parties there between the two houses. Really, in some ways, even though no one stayed there overnight, they were homes. You know, like they were safe places. I'm just 1 second. Let me plug my computer in.
Of course.
My dog Baxter is underneath me. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Fantastic.
So honestly, the IBC was one of the very first places that I felt like I can go. I felt like I was at the IBC 3 or 4 times a week when I first got to UF. It was the dorm room and it was the IBC because the campus was so big. I didn't really know where to go or what to do sometimes. And, you know, MFOS was there. They had an office and I would go see people at the office, but they didn't have a couch for you to sit around in. So, gosh, those are, I don't know. I still believe to this day, I think that students care about those places even more than we did, which is something I can't imagine because we cared so much about them. And I'm happy that they're around and bigger and better today.
Yeah. No, yeah, I was asking that question because, you know, like they rebuild them, but it's not the same thing, you know, like people expected them to be like houses, you know, it felt like home. So it kind of felt like a place of inclusion. So it felt like, you know, your house, people could sleep there, people could do practically anything in there. And it felt like a safe space. And I guess why I'm bringing all this up is just for the fact, like, you know, being an MFOS student, that also means that you're able to like look for those safe spaces within the university. It's not just one place, but you know, you could go from one side to another side and kind of create like those social networks that we're kind of talking about. And through those social networks, hopefully, eventually, you kind of create like some social capital through all this social capital within the networks that you create and have. And hopefully, they'll help you out throughout the following years or your next career pathway. And it seems like for you, like a lot of your friends, you guys still talk to each other. You guys still connect. And I think that's very important, being very important through the MFOS program. And, you know, without it, like this wouldn't be possibilities for you to kind of go and move to the next chapter of your life, knowing all the people that you have met and are still meeting. So it makes me just think a lot about like the spaces that we currently have and how they're being utilized at the university. And, you know, and hopefully we're able to get the most out of them.
I hope so, because I know that they have, you know, the new student union. I was invited to the ribbon cutting of both of those.
Wonderful.
And the student union. And, you know, there's other spaces. Really, La Casita and IBC are competing now with these other spaces that are in the student union, from what I understand, because they have offices and stuff there as well. So I'm not there to know if it's better or not. But what I can say is that those houses were very critical to the bodies of people that they represented and served. And as we were talking about learning other cultures, without them being so close and side by side, I'm not sure how close that integration how quickly that integration would have occurred, because La Casita was right there, you know? And they were open to everyone, right? Like, I mean, the IBC, La Casita, obviously they have cultural, objectives, right? But at the end of the day, the printing wasn't just for Black people at the IBC. The meeting space wasn't just for Hispanics at La Casita. We had meetings at La Casita as well, you know? And I thought that was really smart and good for community.
Would other students join La Casita or IBC that were MFOS, part of the MFOS program? Or were you like one of the only ones that you knew of, at least during that time?
No, other students joined. You know, it was another layer of a sense of community. So we had our MFOS people, and what we did was say, hey, have you heard about IBC? You know, and then we go to the IBC together. Or have you heard about the BSU? and BSU would have meetings at the IBC, and there would be MFOS people there. So I think that there were a number of roads that might have led you there. But one thing's for certain is that MFOS students, although students in MFOS come from all sorts of backgrounds, they're not all ethnically diverse, right? But there were a lot of people who were ethnically diverse that were MFOS students, and I think ultimately migrated and found their way to La Casita and to the IBC.
Fantastic. So I'm just moving forward. I don't want to take much of your time anymore, but I know we're already past the hour, but I'm grateful. That means it's been a really good...
I didn't even notice until you said it.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I'm like, ooh, I don't want to take your time, but I do want you to maybe give us, provide an advice maybe for the upcoming class coming up, for the next upcoming cohorts. What is an advice that you would give now as an alumni also, but as also a person that has created a career for themselves, that has been successful in life in that sense? What is an advice that you would like to give to the future generations coming into the program?
Yeah, I'd first say congratulations. I tell them to be bold. I tell them that their seat at the University of Florida is sealed, and because they're going to be sitting in it. And so whenever they come to a chair that they've been given at the University of Florida, they've been put in that room for a reason. That's to speak up. That's to learn something. That's to give some advice. And I would tell them, always make sure that your chair in the room is noticed because you took advantage of it.
Fantastic. Okay, another question. Where do you see the program evolving? How do you see the program evolving within the next 10, 20 years? Or what is something, how would you like it to evolve? Either
I think that I hope the program grows as full as it can to meet the needs of qualified students who have gotten into the University of Florida, but are looking for help to make their dreams come true. And that help, takes people who have courage to give money and to believe in those students. And most of the time, believing in the students isn't hard because they've already done so many great things to let you know how awesome they are. It's like it's low-hanging fruit is what it is, for these students. So hopefully they grow to meet the need. But I also hope that they continue the support for the students, because at the end of the day, money comes and goes, but the support that you give people is what's going to really last and what they're going to learn from in order for them to one day be support, right? Like, it'll put them in the best position to hopefully become donors to the program themselves. I donate to the program. I'm a donor. And I think that I wouldn't be able to without those foundational things and the support. So I think that there's no limit to that support. It can always be improved and grow and be better. And so in what ways can we diversify the programming to integrate students sooner? Or in what ways can we be thinking about those students thinking about their next step sooner in a way that that prepares them for the financial, expectations of that next step? And so I think the program is already doing this. I just think that they have the ability to enhance it, and I think that they'll rise to the expectation of that.
Fantastic. Marianne, do you have any last questions that you might like to ask?
No, I think that was those were good wrapping questions. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Do you have any last comments, reflections that you would like to add, Mr. White?
I think I've talked you down enough, but hopefully I've given you some insight into my own personal experiences and background. And believe it or not, if you were impressed with anything that I said, I think that there's so many more impressive people in the program. Not even because maybe they had the most extravagant challenges, but just their minds and what they want to do and change, I think is really important and is a reason why this program, I think, is one of the crown jewels of the programs the university has to offer. All
right. Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you and hearing your narrative. We're excited. We'll keep you posted with everything that we're doing, and we have a friend right behind you.
Oh, this is Baxter.
Hey, buddy. Fantastic. Well, nonetheless, we are very thankful for the opportunity to conduct this interview with you, and we wish you the best of luck in the upcoming years and career pathways that you have chosen. And yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Have a great weekend.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.